All right, guys, so now that we've gone over just the initial presentation that talks through some of the more technical parts of the protocol, I'm going to actually go through your protocol handouts that you have, that you should have printed with you guys, just really quickly as a quick summary. 1 second, I will screen share it with you. All right, so this is the handout that you guys have received from Susan. So don't forget to print it out and bring it to your mission. Maybe bring an extra copy in case one gets damaged. So if you go down to the 3rd page, that's where we start with that primary assessment that we just talked about. So with your primary assessment, it's got the P going all the way down as little reminders of everything we just talked about. So if you need a quick refresher, you can watch this video again after Susan sends it out to you guys. But everything is written out right here for you. Practice this while you're still at home, just reading through it so you're comfortable with the order of the steps and what each letter means. Because once you know what the letters mean, it should be pretty easy for you guys to figure out, okay, I'm check the scene for safety, patient is safe, so I'm gonna step up. What's the next letter? M, P, so massive hemorrhage, I'm gonna check for bleeding, things like that. So just try to have that systematic thought process by the time you guys arrive to your pre-sims. All right, so then we go down to the triage protocol. Again, everything that I just talked about you guys with on the PowerPoint is still here for you. So your triage protocol has a quick summary of that, and it even has your triage classifications. So everything is written out that I just talked about on that PowerPoint. So you can read through that, try to get comfortable. Again, priority 1, red is bad. Yellow, you can slow down a little bit, but they still need help. Green, don't really need immediate help. They're okay to wait. And then priority 0 are black. They are not savable out in the field. And our decon, because if they're contaminated with anything from the environment, we need to decontaminate them. There's copies of the triage color coding tags from that presentation that you guys can see for examples. You don't have those exact tags, so just keep that in mind. That's just something for you to help remember the different priority levels. So, pre-simulation protocol checklist for your crew. So prior to your pre-sim arrival, you're going to be receiving the video and the protocol, this document in advance. Review it, please. It's very important, and it helps you guys to grow more as a crew if you're more familiar with this. So when Susan says you have homework, she means it. And then, so T-minus 2 days, you're arriving at your pre-sim. This is your additional pre-sim lecture. So review the procedures for donning and doffing all of your equipment. Be comfortable with that, because when you hit the time for your MEVA, or you get your emergency call for a MEVA, that means that you need to be able to quickly don your equipment. Susan likes us to get dressed donned within 3 minutes. So that'll take some practice, and pre-sim is your time to practice that. As a crew, you'll review the protocol and make sure you understand all of the steps, because you're going to be performing it together. That way, weakest link in the chain, if everyone's up to speed and everyone's comfortable, then it'll go pretty smoothly. And then practice closed loop communication as much as possible. So what that means, when we say closed loop communication, it means repeating back if someone tells you something to make sure that you have it correct. So if someone says, hey, Susan, go get me this tourniquet. Susan says, okay, I'm getting the tourniquet, Melissa. Here's the tourniquet. Like, just repeating it back so that they understand that you heard it, and it's not just shouting something out into the void and hoping that someone does the thing that you asked for. So closed loop communication is very important. We use it in medicine, we use it in the military. It's all very relevant to making sure that things go smoothly. On your next day of pre-sim, you'll be reviewing those MEVA protocols, which Susan has typed out for you guys specifically for MAU. Make sure that you guys download a map of Vasquez rocks. You can use this to obtain your coordinates when you're in your GIVA. So at least be able to find Vasquez rocks on the map. You will have a little bit of a phone signal there so that you can find it, but that's going to be important for you guys if you get coordinates ahead of time, or when you're doing your geological extravehicular activity, to know, because that's where you're using that mapping to build onto finding your patients. So that's very important for you guys. That's just a tip. Then, because you guys are in beautiful Long Beach, at the beach is just a suggestion, but you can perform the full scenario. At that point, since you guys will have had the paperwork for almost 2 weeks, you guys can't use your notes during this scenario. Your crew commander will help to lead the mission, Ms. Rena Tolentino, And at that point, she's going to be doing just giving you the prompts. So when you guys break up as a team, crew commander is your HABCOM. Notionally, she can't go anywhere at the beach, but that will provide your prompts during the scenario. So she'll be timing you guys and taking note of your times for your performance so that we can find areas for improvement even after that first run. One crew member from your MEVA search and rescue team is going to be assigned as the team lead. So that means everybody's still part of the team, but someone's got to kind of be the head honcho. Someone's got to be the one in charge that everyone can look to and to repeat back to manage the care of the patient and make sure it's smooth. That's really important, especially when we get into multiple patient scenarios, because they'll be coordinating and overseeing the whole thing while there's two things happening on each side. So the team lead is more hands-off and helping to guide and give direction. Now, I also want you guys to be aware, everyone should try to fill this role at least once too. And then one crew member assigned by the team lead of each scenario should have the main aid bag. You won't necessarily have a tourniquet on your person, depending how many tourniquets are available, but one person should at least have the aid bag, which will have the thermal blanket, it'll have tourniquets, it'll have all the equipment that you need. So, lost my train of thought for a second. Okay, so with the scenarios, I want you guys to be aware that it is a scenario. You are immersed in it. It's just like being in sim. What that means is that you can't break that fourth wall of talking to your HABCOM if your HABCOM technically isn't there. What you need to be doing is get in there, get your hands on the patient, actually physically touch the patient and check for these things. Like if you're checking for hemorrhage, feel that the suit is patent, it's intact all the way down the limbs. If you have in the scenario a bleed, then the HABCOM will prompt you that you have signs of bleeding. The patient's crying because their leg hurts and they feel like they're in a pool of blood. Something like that. And don't just look at HABCOM and be like, okay, well, I guess I'll put a tourniquet on it. That's your opportunity to be like, I found a bleed, I'm putting a tourniquet on. Pretend they're not there, okay? So it's a little tricky for people sometimes in their first run of a first aid scenario, but just try to keep in mind that you're technically what you would be finding is on your patient. Just because it's not a real patient, someone has to tell you what you're finding, but just keep going through the motions while they tell you. And then your equipment. So I recommend having 3 cat tourniquets. We'll see how many you guys are able to get just by the time you guys get to the scenario. A rope and bungee cords and a litter, so a flat bag thing that you can lay the patient on, and you can secure them with the rope and bungee cords to take them to the HAB unit. And then at least 1 mannequin, especially for the beach run. I think 1 might be okay, just so you guys can try out working as a team and communicating. And then fill out your first questionnaire. So then we have your EVA protocols. They're very similar. So your team receives a distress call prompting a search and rescue. Don your equipment quickly. Make sure everyone is appropriately dressed prior to airlock decompression sequence. Our crew managed to not kill anyone, so make sure you guys try that too. Step 2, using coordinates that you obtained from your GIVA, locate the crew members that are injured. So at least one of your MEVA scenarios will be at Vasquez Rocks. One of them might be near your campsite, so just keep in mind, Semper Gumby, be flexible, but just be aware that you'll need to go out to the patient. Once you arrive on the scene, we're doing that P-March P. So check the scene for safety. How many patients are there? Are there any hazards? Move with a purpose while you do this. Don't just walk up to your patient casually. This is one of your crew members and they're severely injured. So move towards them like you're trying to help them. Step 4, you're going to approach them, communicate with them. So that's good for checking for consciousness. So you can ask what happened. You can check the vitals on their life support, and that prompted information can be provided for you. And you can check whether their equipment is intact. From there, just run through your P-March P. Once you get through there, you can triage them. So relay that triage level to HABCOM. It's important that you keep that communication line open. You're going to finish your P-March P as appropriate. And then if you have a pressurized dome, one crew member, probably the person with the aid bag, will also be responsible for setting up that pressurized dome for recompression and giving you a little more time to provide care. and then the casualty evac back to the camp for higher care. We were also looking at including just intravehicular activity protocol at some point in the schedule. So that would be upon arrival to the scene. The scene is your habitat, you're at the scene, but just making sure that the scene is safe, same sort of thing. But one thing that's different is after we provide the care that's appropriate from our PMARCH-P document, you have the option to transition to a telesurgery teleanesthesia protocol. So that gives you options where you could perform the intubation if there's airway compromise, there's loss of consciousness of the patient, or there's burns to their airways and you think that they wouldn't be able to breathe by themselves very long. So these are all protocols that you actually do with MAU, and these are things that can be included in your continuity of care for that patient. So there's teleanesthesia, there's intubation, and there's the telesurgery protocol for repairing wounds. An optional step specifically for the IVA scenario is you could also perform CPR on that patient. There's a reason that I don't have that included in the extravehicular activity protocol, and that's noted on the next page for you too. But when you're doing EVA, it's not realistic. You are not near care to be able to get higher level care immediately for the patient like you are in the HAB. You wouldn't be able to get good compressions through a pressurized spacesuit. And finally, CPR is something where once you start it, you cannot stop it. So the fact that you have to move the patient and carry them on a cloth litter, that's just not something that would be feasible in the field. And that would expend resources and crew members. And it's just, that's something to keep in mind where that would be a triage priority black. However, it is appropriate in the IVA because you guys have that ability to provide the higher level care, and it is a safe environment where you could do continuous compressions until you see signs of life and things happening. You'll get CPR training later. And then I put a sample CPR guide in for you guys just in case you have no CPR experience. I don't endorse whatever company made this. They're not paying me. I just wanted to give you guys an example. But this is just a quick summary chart where you could see, focus on the adult one, but the adult methods of performing CPR. So that's just a ratio of if you determine that in your PMARCH-P there's no circulation, you would begin CPR, which is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So you're keeping their heart beating manually. So that's where you give 30 chest compressions and you'll give them 2 breaths. And you just keep doing that cycle over and over and over again until there's obvious signs of life, the scene becomes unsafe for whatever reason, you're too tired to continue, someone else with the same training or higher can take over, or if you had an AED available. So again, you'll have the CPR training later. You don't need to memorize that at the moment, but this is here for you. Focus on this little part of the table though. All right, and then you guys have a crew health and safety officer, and their job is to take your vitals every day, and they track them in a table, and they're able to send that into the remote medical science team, which I'll be a part of that for you guys too, so I'll still be tracking on what you guys are doing. But, so the crash course in vitals, normal heart rate is between 60 and 100 beats per minute. So if it's lower than that, that could be a problem for the patient. That could mean that there's not good blood flow. If it's higher than 100 beats per minute, that might be okay just because they're under distress or in pain, but that is outside the normal range. So if it was prolonged like that, that would be a problem as well. Blood pressure. The normal blood pressure is 120/80. The top number is called systolic pressure. The bottom number is called diastolic pressure. So that just means the pressure. The systolic is the high number when the heart's contracting and the blood's exerting the most pressure that it's going to exert, and diastolic is when the heart is starting to relax, so the pressure drops a little bit before the next beat. So if there's pressure that's higher than those numbers, so if it is greater, like 100, 120 to 139, that's okay, but it's technically getting into the hypertensive range once it's above 130. 140 is really starting to get into the more concerning range. Again, if you were in pain, your blood pressure would go up. But if somebody has a significant bleed in your scenario, that blood pressure would be lower. Something to keep in mind that can just be clues for how the patient is doing for you or how your vitals are when they measure them. And then respiratory rate, normally 12 to 20 breaths per minute. A lower respiratory rate, oh, incomplete sentence. A lower respiratory rate can be a sign that the patient is starting to be more severely ill. If they're breathing faster than that, could be because they're in pain or because they aren't getting good oxygen perfusion, and so their body's naturally trying to breathe more. Oxygen saturation is how much oxygen is being carried by the patient's blood. So we would want that above 95%. So when you guys are up there, you're going to have a pulse oximeter on, which measures your oxygen saturation. It's okay if that's slightly below 95% if you're not used to the altitude that you're at. That's just a normal thing that happens. Eventually, your body would make more red blood cells to help compensate for that. But it's okay if it's short term. In our patients where we're trying to keep them alive, less than, I would say, 94% would be another sign that they might be in trouble, though, because they might not be breathing as much. Normal temperatures, this applies to you more than the patients, but just so you know, normal body temperatures are between 97.7 and 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Your thermometer's in Fahrenheit. Low core body temperature is hypothermia, and that's a little bit of a spectrum. So it can be mild, moderate, or severe. And if you feel like you're getting too cold to the point that you're not able to shiver anymore, that's a sign that you have hypothermia. That's a problem. That's actually pretty moderate hypothermia. So you want to make sure that you're staying warm. Look out for your fellow crew members. Don't get too chilly. The nights can get cold. I was there in December, so it was only a month before you guys. But it can get really cold and you guys can get sick. So keep that in mind. Hopefully you have heated blankets if it's wintertime. And then hyperthermia, which is a high core body temperature, can be caused by a lot of things. It can be caused by the environment. When you're wearing all that equipment, you could get heat exhaustion. So keep in mind, if you're starting to feel excessively hot, where you're profusely sweating, that could be a sign that you have a little bit of heat exhaustion, and you want to make sure that you're well hydrated and you're able to cool off. Heat exhaustion can progress to an emergency called heat stroke. And in that case, your core temperature is very high and it's a medical emergency. That would be more of a call 911 situation. So we want to make sure you guys take care of yourselves before you reach that point. That is reversible. Just cool off, put cool cloths on yourself, take off the stuff that's making you too hot, and just keep checking in with your crew members. So do note that we take vitals with an oral temperature. We're not going to take the other temperature that gets your real core temperature, which is a rectal. So that's okay. You don't need that measured. This is a good estimation for us. There's just other samples of how to read different vitals. And finally, we have your pre-simulation questionnaire. So this is mostly a yes or no, or just ranking how you feel about that first scenario when you were able to do it. This is a little bit of background on you as well. So what do you do for work? Have you had, medical training? And then finally, we'll come down to the scenario that your team led in the pre-sim scenario. So this is, I want to know, did you identify what injuries your casualty had? What was your triage? What you guys did? So just try to remember as you're running through, everyone should try to get a chance to be team lead. Just write down everything that happened for me. Then we have a questionnaire for your first MEVA. Again, this is evaluating how you believe the team's performance did from your team lead perspective. And from your second MEVA, same thing. So what your role was, how you evaluated that your team did. And then finally, once you exit the simulation, I just have one last questionnaire for you to sort of gauge how you felt about the scenarios, how you felt that the protocol went for you. And then finally, any questions, concerns, comments that you might have that we can implement into the future missions. So that is a summary of everything in your entire packet. It's 15 pages, but 5 pages of questionnaires. But if you guys have any additional questions, I am on your remote science medical team, so you can feel free to reach out to me. Susan has my contact information. If you have questions, reach out to me before you get into your simulation, though, because you won't have a good phone signal and I won't be able to help you very much. Other than that, Susan has all the information that you guys will need, and the the scenarios will be provided to your crew commander. And I think I'm done, Susan. Goodness.